It's a great speech, and I don't know how to expand my business. I need to talk to you and consult you on that.
Rocky, it kept me the whole time, and what I enjoyed about it is that I find you extremely smooth when you're up. You just have confidence and smoothness, and you go from point to point, and it creates a very trusting environment. I also thought you stood out when you engaged Cynthia. When you referenced her, talked to her, had that very short one-on-one conversation with her. I thought that really, even though you weren't talking to me, that pulled me in. What you did with the iPads, maybe I'm not as versed in bells and whistles as I should be, being in the bank and working with technology, but that's very cool. Without having a projector, that was kind of a neat effect the way you did that. A couple things that I would recommend for this, and I got the sense that what you're presenting is more for maybe a longer presentation. I'm not sure if you kind of carved it down so it fit in the meeting, or if you plan on giving it more as a half an hour type seminar, because it seemed like there's a lot of opportunities to add material, but they just wouldn't fit in a 10 to 12 minute seminar. For example, when you engaged Cynthia, I think she was the only one. I don't recall you calling on talking to any of us, and I would love to have seen more of that, because that really caught my attention. Also, the example you gave of Kodak, and then by contrast, the example of Instaprint. Totally different approach to the industry. One went down, one went up. A couple of more of those as you walk through your presentation. But again, that would be assuming you have a longer period of time to give it. And even though you were extremely even, smooth, confident, I would have liked to have seen a little more up and down. There were a couple times when your body language said, I'm about to tell you something really important, but I didn't catch the important point, the emphasis on the next thing you said. You just kind of kept the same even tone of voice after you let me think, at least, that something climactic was about to come out.
Well, Rocky, I agree with a lot of what Patrick said. I think the personal interaction was very powerful. And I also got the sense when I was thinking of this presentation, like when I found myself a little disconnected, why did I imagine or speculate that might be? And what I came to on my speculation was that I was seeing something that was part of something that was much larger. And I've been in those situations, and I think one thing that would specifically make that more powerful is if you're presenting a large system or a body of knowledge, like a coaching methodology, which I have sold coaching methodologies, when you breeze through graphics and media that's associated with the program, it makes them tend to seem unimportant if you show something and then move through it quickly. And that came across a little bit in the way you talked about it, like you weren't speaking to it as if it was important. It's kind of like, yeah, we have these 9 things, and there are these things on the canvas that you write down, and that's the canvas, and this is how it works. A more effective strategy, I think, would be don't show as much and leave a little more mystery perhaps about what's included, but focus on why it matters and put that time into why it matters.
Rocky, I like the rhythm you had. You had a great rhythm. You talked about accountability led to focus, and this led to that, and you kind of repeated the same thing over and over again. It became kind of like a story, that rhythm. There's a place in there. I don't remember exactly the words. Use the you. You introduced me to using the you, and you do it very, very well. The audiovisual thing I already mentioned by Patrick, very effective. Mention the benefits, here's what you're going to get out of it. You short-sold the benefits a little bit. So I think if you want to give a presentation to people, it's supposed to be about you. It should be, hey, it's about you, not you. But it's about you, not you. And that's kind of the effect. It's supposed to may not apply to you. Well, it's you, it should apply to everybody. Show it applies to everybody. The questions were good, pulled people in. And you mentioned the audience name. You mentioned Ben, you mentioned Cynthia, pulled them in, and Patrick mentioned it's very effective. You had examples. There's something better you can do than examples. I know you know what it is, but I'll come to that in a little bit. And the handouts you did last, which was great. Thoughts for development are maybe have some sort of a problem to solve. What is the problem you're solving, and how you're solving and stepping through it? Think about words like imagine. You always talk about how important it is to see and hear and touch and smell, and none of that really is in there. The VAKS, the video, audio, kinesthetic, smell, you always talk about it. Love that richness of it. Put that in there a little bit. Maybe make it relevant too. How does it apply to us? Again, how does it apply to you? And then the thing that's better than examples, of course, a story. Stories need to be seen, known, and heard. Just create a story. I was talking with Bob, and I got together and said, Bob, I got this problem. I don't know what the heck I'm going to do about it. And Bob said, well, Rocky, why don't you just put it up on and he could be the guru. Put it up on this thing and said, wow, that's really effective. And I thought about how this could be used in other situations and that type of thing. So you kind of learn the process. And so you start, you don't know everything. You learn it through somebody else, and then the audience can empathize with that. Say, wow, we don't know anything, but we can learn the same way you learn. And that can be an effective way to get things across. Or at least have a story, seen, known, and heard, some sort of conversation, dialogue going back that drives the conflict. Examples tell, stories sell.
There were a lot of things I thought you did very well. You talked about clarity, focus, and accountability at the beginning of this presentation, and you talked about how important they were. And then you didn't really refer back to it at the end, which I thought would have been a good way of sticking with this idea. I think you clearly showed the convenience of using the canvas, how easy it is to see things, to recognize where your absences are. Although one thing I wondered was, can't you have white space because you are fully satisfied with how you're doing in that thing? Now maybe that's a disaster in business, and you should always be thinking of how you can improve it, but it did occur to me that if you've got white space, maybe that's why. I thought that the Kodak story was very, very interesting, and I thought that could have been brought in even earlier as an example of somebody who was not using this kind of idea and the trouble that it caused them, and perhaps bring up something else, somebody else who might have a smaller business who has a similar situation, how this could have helped them. Thought your call to action was very, very good. Passed out the information and told us how we could help ourselves. One thing that I thought was a little bit daunting was you talked about, you have 9 to 11 areas that need to be addressed. And I wrote down, it seems to be both vague and daunting. It could be 9, it could be 11, possibly 10. And that also seems like a lot of different things. And just the idea of having to work on 9 to 11 things might possibly cause me to think this is too hard. And the sticky notes, you focus more on the technology and the convenience of moving the things from one to another than what you would specifically write on the sticky notes. I think if you said, for example, let's just say you need to get more customers. Let's just focus on getting more customers. What kinds of things could you bring across? And here's what you might write on your sticky notes. And then after you get the customers, you might move that sticky note over to, I don't know whatever, revenue, because they're not paying fast enough or something.
Let me share some things I enjoyed about your speech. Some of it you've heard already. I like the fact you said right in the beginning, for me, you gave your credentials. Now, for me personally, this is a man I want to listen to. But before I go any further, when you called me out, my question is, did I look confused or did I look interested?
I like to think interesting.
Very good. I was a little worried if I was looking totally out of it, like what you're talking about. I love the fact that you snapped your fingers a few times. Now, some people might find that annoying. I like it because you did it when you, how do you want to get clarity? Snap. Capture, snap. And I like that effect. I like how you did that. I like the idea of visualizing the canvas. I tend to be a visual person, so I like the idea that you say we have this canvas and the notes, and how easily those notes can be manipulated, depending on what you want to talk. I thought that was a very good idea. Now you mentioned, and this sort of goes back to what Shannon was saying a little earlier, clarity, focus, and accountability. I personally would have liked a brief definition, because in my mind, clarity and focus are quite similar. So I didn't quite see that relationship. So I would have loved to have heard maybe some examples how the clarity and the focus and the accountability tied a little more concrete. Taking that abstract idea and giving me that practical example works for me. I like the example that you used Kodak because I happen to have known about that story. So I felt like, ooh, I know what he's talking about. Come on. I have to agree with Ben. This sounds like it probably should be a longer presentation because what would have been something to think about if it is going to be a longer presentation. It might have been a nice time to do an actual canvassing exercise. Maybe give a particular project or a certain assignment and actually work through how canvassing looks like. I'm hearing it, but me working through it would solidify it more in my mind. A little more body language. Like I said, I love the snapping, but a little more body language would have added some more impact. So for me personally, I sort of captured the abstract idea, but for me, if you can just pull it more, make it more practical, I think it will make the presentation more effective. Mr. Postmaster.